All right, cool. So we should be live. I'm going to let it kick in a few seconds here, but why the hell not? Hi, I'm sure the audio quality is a little different than what you're used to. I am live with my friend, podcaster and fellow Twitter shitposter, Repeal the 20th Century. We just had a fun time in downtown Dallas, reviewing and watching the America debates from Barry Weiss's The Free Press and the foundation of, individual rights and expression.
Yeah, I think that's what FIRE stands for. I hope so.
Something like that, right? Anyways, so the debate was, should the United States shut its borders, with the most interesting conglomeration of Barry Weiss moderating with Ann Coulter and Sohrab Ahmari on the Shut the Border Down versus Nick Gillespie of Reason Magazine and Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks telling us to keep the borders open.
Yeah, definitely a weird mix of people, especially in 2024. We kept saying the whole time, it feels like we were transported back to like the 2014, 2015, 2016 era, because in the talking points really reflected that a bit, except on like Ann Coulter's side, particularly at the end there where she recommended Camp of the Saints as the book that everyone should read on this topic, which I was not expecting at all. And I'm still a bit in shock of. But I mean, like, if I was to summarize each person's point, it's, Ann Coulter saying, look, doesn't matter where they come from, the 1970s immigration laws are a complete disaster. We shouldn't be having low-skill immigration, and we definitely shouldn't be having immigrants from countries where they've ruined their own country. And then Sohrab Ahmari being like, well, actually, labor activists like Cesar Chavez actually really don't like immigration, and here's a bunch of studies that actually show all the economic points they make are wrong. And then Nick Gillespie, of course, doing the classic Cato bit of, well, the GDP actually goes up, and they do the jobs that Americans don't want to do, like plumbing and housekeeping and raising your babies. So we need them. And then Cenk Uygur being like, well, like the food's really good, and we're a nation of immigrants, and blah blah blah. So nothing new on that end. But yeah, would you say that's a pretty accurate description of each person's point?
I feel like it. Like we spent maybe the first, because everyone gave these short 5-minute opening statements, or I think it was 5 minutes. And of course, the side for not shutting the border down went way over time with no real moderation, which of course, but it felt like it was 2015. I felt like everything that Ann Coulter said was something I would have seen at a CPI conference, almost 10 years ago. And it felt like she was just repeating the same talking points that she's been making since she wrote Adios America. She was making the same points that you would have heard anyone from the early alt-right, 10 years ago talk about. And it was just, I think I said it more than once to my buddy here. I was just like, hey, I think that we just stepped into a time machine. Like, what year do these people think that we're really in? And it was, within the first 60 seconds of the pro-immigration side, you got World War II and certain events that happened in World War II mentioned. You had the food argument get mentioned. Again, like Molly Tippett's dad, right? Like they're Iowans with better food. And then, of course, the discussion about, and of course, Sohrab Ahmari was coming at it in the same way that you would expect Philip Cafaro to come from it, where when he wrote the book, the case, how many is too many, the progressive case for reducing immigration to the United States. So it was honestly, the first 15 minutes was just like the introductions that Barry Weiss was giving, and they had this announcer from the theater on the PA system, and it was just basically like, oh, by the way, it's important for you to remember that free debate and discussion is going, it's the way forward. So again, literally, we just walked back in time where liberals are trying to do the open exchange of ideas and debate discussion. It was an absolute just crapshoot. Because I mean, I think everyone had you were supposed to text with your phone about whether or not the border should be shut down. So like going into the debate, it was like what 70.
I think it was 71% to 29%. So 71% in favor of shutting down the border, and 29% not for shutting down the border. And it actually changed in favor of the border. I think the final numbers were something like 63% in favor of shutting down the border.
37 for keeping it open.
37 for keeping it open. So a change in favor of the open border side, but still ultimately close the border won. And I think a lot of that change has to do that it was very different how Coulter was debating and Armani was debating. Obviously, it was not lost on me that all three out of four of the people on there can trace their ancestry to Ellis Island or later. While Ann Coulter is the only one who traces that before that. Because Armani's position was we just need high skilled labor. We need to get rid of low skilled labor, but we can keep all the high skilled labor. So basically people like him can come into the country still, but everybody else can't come into the country. Everybody from Latin America can't come, but everybody from, Iran, Pakistan, India, who are going to go into these like IT jobs, they can come. But Ann Coulter was, very clear that it really just the vast majority of even legal immigrants don't need to be coming here. And she very well, and to what I can tell, a lot of people on the open border side did not understand, because we had two ladies sitting next to us the whole time who were just some of the most low IQ, typical white women from, the Arts District of Dallas, who did not understand at all what the point Ann Coulter was making when she said, look, in the 1920s with the immigration from Ellis Island, so many of those people went back when they realized they couldn't just get a free ride off of America, and it wasn't just easy money, that it was sink or swim. And that now when we had this change where now we have welfare for these people and we can hold up these people and let anybody in, that now they stay because they get a free ride. And that was completely lost on them. And some of them, it got to a point where they were talking about national security. And Ann Coulter mentioned that, even if immigrants aren't the ones doing terrorist attacks, it's the children of immigrants who are doing these terrorist attacks, and that even the children of immigrants are a problem for national security concerns, but just concerns in generally. And, the women next to us were like, I thought the point was, about, closing the border. Completely misunderstanding that the border doesn't just mean the physical border, but also, the people coming in on planes, overstaying their visas, all that stuff. And so I think Ann Coulter definitely was making points that not only felt like they were from that era of 2014, 2015, 2016, but also were extremely relevant because those points just they didn't need to change. She showed that they didn't need to change, and there is relevant now. And I was really glad that she kept honing in on all these fake studies that the pro-border side like to bring out, like the Cato study that, the GDP line goes up, or the study that actually illegal immigrants commit less crime than native-borns. And she was like, actually, the Cato study is completely flawed and is bad numbers. And Sohrab Ahmani actually, surprisingly, did a good job about bringing up other counteractive studies.
He was probably the most level-headed out of all four of them, and this is coming from someone who doesn't typically like the guy. Sohrab came out with arguably the most prepared person for this entire debate. If you've been listening or reading Ann Coulter for any length of period of time, Ann Coulter just winged it and basically did Adios America's greatest hits. And, she basically did everything but say, listen, these people aren't white. was basically Ann Coulter's entire shtick. Was, listen, these people don't assimilate. The way that we have immigration does not work at all, and we need to be mindful of this fact because things just don't work the way that you think so. And because we have a welfare system, we have a general judicial process that gets flagrantly ignored by multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat alike. It's exactly what I would expect her to hear. Whereas Sora Bamari, who came out, like I mentioned earlier, if you've read Philip Cafaro's book, How Many is Too Many? The Progressive Case for Reducing Immigration, this is basically what his entire talking point was about. It was about there's no national cohesion, and we have to keep in mind that the labor market does not work this way. And he's framing it in the same way that Cesar Chavez would, about corporate arbitrage and using immigrants to break up strikes and union labor. I had to laugh my ass off at this because I called him out because he wrote a book called Tyranny, Inc. And it's not a half bad book. You can read my review of it in the Mars Review of Books. But I quipped that he talks about corporate tyranny and he doesn't address other issues in the country, i.e. like racial issues. And I had said that Amazon uses demographic heat maps. And this is true. You can go look this up. They use demographic heat maps to prevent workers at like Whole Foods from unionizing in more pro-labor states. And he mentioned that actually on the debate stage, and it makes me it's like, oh, interesting that you acknowledge this now about immigration and not about your book. But he came off with the most studies. He tried his best to be entertaining. Sora Bamari has not a single charismatic bone in his body, but he was arguably the most well-spoken and well-presented person on there, so good for him. Cenk Uygur and Nick Gillespie gave every single reason why libertarianism and progressivism are cringe, and maybe you should just, I think someone on the chat has it perfect, Westy here, I trans heart GDP. I mean, that's basically it. That's exactly what we saw. It was the number go up argument, and basically admitting that, like, listen, guys, things aren't all bad. Like, look at all these, like, exceptions to the rule that we can point to. And it was people talking past each other. And it was an absolute shit show. And so, yeah, I mean, like, if you wanted to go back in time and understand what an immigration debate circa 2015 looked like, if you weren't a part of the scene back then, this is what happened in Dallas, And as I'm listening to, Barry Weiss talk about being a lesbian, being a lesbian Jewess in Los Angeles and how great she is. But the immigrants are replacing our native population of Catholic Iranians. Yeah, I know. But it was awful. Like every argument that you hear, like the right criticize about immigration from the left, whether it's about food, whether it's about GDP, or about native-born immigrants, or native-born Americans committing more crime than immigrants. It's just like, okay, how many of those criminals are black or black people? Like, oh, native-borns are so bad. I'm like, okay, how about we just compare this to maybe white and upper-class Asians and Jews compared to the immigrants, and we'll see how well that goes. Take about 13% off that population count and get back to me.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about like that point of like, oh, native-borns committed more, is that even if that was true, we can just look at the numbers by like ethnicity of who is being arrested, and it would just show us that by native-borns committing more crime, what we actually mean is that the children of illegal immigrants commit more crime than illegal immigrants, which is possibly could be true. Because, I mean, Hispanic crime rates are higher per capita than white Americans' crime rate and Asian Americans' crime rate and Jewish Americans' crime rate.
We didn't hear that word exactly once. The term per capita was not used in this entire debate.
That is true. Yeah, I was actually surprised by that. But, like, funnily enough, there's a really good book called The Cultural Transplant by Dr. Garrett Jones at GMU, which I highly recommend you read if you have not read. You're definitely not as well informed on immigration as you should be if you haven't read that yet. But yeah, The Cultural Transplant, Cenk Uygur actually ends up making the argument that Garrett Jones made in that book, which the primary argument is that yes, assimilation exists, but it's two-way assimilation, basically where immigrants become half American, though he argues that it's not exactly half. It's probably less than that, especially the way the culture is going now. And then we become half whatever their culture is. So he actually made this argument in that for many, many, many decades, Italian food was the number one food in America. This is obviously after Ellis Island immigration that this became the case. But recently it has been unseated, and now Mexican food is the number one food in America. And both of these being the case is an example of two-way immigration. Funnily enough, earlier today on Twitter, I saw a graph of Europe where it was, what's the most popular food? Is it either some foreign food or is it the native food that is the most popular? And you could probably overlay that map with the map of the highest immigration to those countries, because it's all the Eastern European and Mediterranean states that all say their food, their native born food is better than ethnic food, while Germany, United Kingdom, the Scandinavian countries all say it's ethnic food that's better. And it's the same thing with the United States. And if you look at states, I bet you if you show me a map of states who say, is their food that's indigenous to that state or foreign food is better, I bet you could probably overlay that map with immigration numbers to those states. Because California and even Texas are probably going to be number one is Mexican food. But if you go to, I don't know, like Wyoming, if you look at Wyoming, they're probably going to say Wyoming food's the best. Maybe not just because of the way the United States is these days, but take it back a few decades, maybe they will. So that's the main point in that book. And interesting enough, the one thing that I think Ann Coulter, the one point that I think she did miss on this all is there was no talk about IQ and what policies these people support when they come here, because that would have been a big thing to use against Nick Gillespie, because the real Achilles heel for libertarians on this issue is to just tell them, look, these new voters that are coming in that you want to make legal immigrants, they overwhelmingly don't support libertarian policies. You will never, ever, ever get a libertarian state if you import millions of people from the third world, because they don't support that, because they didn't support it in their own country. And they overwhelmingly support policies that destroyed their country when they come here. And that's something I didn't really see made a point too much. Ann Coulter lightly touched on it when she said, we can import all these people who ruin their country so they can then ruin our country. But that's all she said on it. She didn't go into specifics. Because I think that was her one real weakness, was that she didn't bring up a lot of studies, I guess. But, these kind of debates are not really – it's kind of weird and awkward to do that anyways. But rhetorically and polemically, she was amazing on the debate.
Yeah, we came here more for the entertainment value than we really did, expecting anything to come out of it. But it was, everyone sort of jokes about touching grass or logging off for a little bit. Well, we did log off for a little bit, and I was in Normie World for about an hour and a half. And Normie World is fucking awful. Normie World sucks. And I say this as I'm listening to people, cheer on Barry Weiss talking about how great she is for her ancestors and how awesome it is to be a free speech proponent and to be a lesbian from Los Angeles, and how awesome it is that, people call her a leftist who's like a traitor, and then other people question her for having a dual loyalties. And it's just like, well, yeah, but having a normal one is terrible. I would absolutely agree with that. I don't like being normal. But to listen to everyone else, and even as we walked in, there were people from I guess Humanitarian International or something.
I'm trying to remember the name of the organization, but it's this really boomer organization.
But I mean, it was a bunch of boomer libs passing out literature about how immigration isn't the problem. There are other reasons behind it. And it was awful. It was just kind of funny. I'm like, no, sir. You have less than 1 year left. Don't worry about it. But it was... Yeah, I was just listening to people cheer on and everything. I mean, Nick Gillespie would always dodge everything with a joke, which is expected for a lot of libertarians. Sohrab Ahmari, again, was arguably the most well-performed person on that stage. It was really there's a pit in my stomach telling me that something's wrong if I'm complimenting him that much. But Cenk Uygur was doing the usual TYT stick about immigration. He did food. He did World War II. He brought up the Nazis. He brought up everything that you would expect. It was like every shitty caricature about online discourse is awful. And so, yeah, no one wanted to address the root cause for why everyone's anxious. Not once did the Great Replacement get mentioned. The only time that it ever did was Cenk Uygur making a comment saying, no one's going through the Darien Gap saying, let's replace the whites. And it's like, well, they might not be saying that, but all the, nonprofit NGO organizations doing it are definitely for that. But yeah, like Cenk Uygur is definitely the court jester type deal of this sort of debate. The only thing Nick Gillespie said that was intelligent was that the Marshall Plan is way overblown and oversold to the body politic. This is an example of what controlled discourse looks like. Yes, Sneed McChuck, you're absolutely right. But yeah, for the low, I don't even want to tell you how much I paid for my ticket because I don't want to embarrass myself. But I mean, it was the only person who made any remote case about immigration at all was Ann Coulter saying, like, listen, it's not going to be America. She tried everything but saying, listen, white Europeans built this country, and you're not going to have that if you replace everybody. So that was the closest thing Ann Coulter, like, again, it was like Ann Coulter was watching fucking Richard Spencer from 2015 when he says we can mow our own damn lawns and cook our own food. That was basically what Ann Coulter was doing to the audience. And we have to keep in mind that the audience there were older, probably Gen X.
It looked like a lot of Gen X and older millennials. Honestly.
We were probably the youngest people there.
Yeah, I would say that we were among the youngest people there. I mean, the women who were sitting next to us were definitely, at minimum, older millennials. I would say they're probably Gen X. They kind of seemed like they were my parents' age, and they're Gen X. But yeah, it was very much like this is for people who are normies. Like it was definitely for that. But the nice thing about that is that normies are talking about how actually even, the immigration of Ellis Island was bad, because that's what Ann Coulter said. I mean, she very pointedly brought up that, a lot of those immigrants left when they figured out it wasn't a free ride and that they were not that good either. Nick Gillespie really tried to appeal to the, oh, well, you say immigrants are bad, but look at, at my parents, or my grandparents who were Italian immigrants, they helped us win World War II. Or what about the Jewish physicists who helped us win World War II? And she was like, well, actually, by large, these people were also not that good. And, we can actually vet and let in small amounts of people who are like that. And I thought it was funny, too, something that Cenk Uygur brought up towards the end was he was like, well, you wouldn't let in Steve Jobs, dad, who was a Syrian immigrant. And I was like, yeah, actually, no, I would love Windows to have won the Apple versus Windows fight. You're making a very great case for me to vote against you, Cenk Uygur. But yeah, that was a lot of what they were talking about. They kept using these small cases of like, oh, we wouldn't have Apple if we didn't have immigrants. Or Cenk even was, prideful enough to say we would have the Young Turks, without immigration. And I was like, wow, really? You're telling me this for the first time, really? And I was very, very glad that Ann Coulter fought back against that and said, actually, we can pick and choose who we want. We can actually pick the big people. Because, like, when they brought up Elon Musk, for example.
They brought up Elon Musk and Peter Thiel.
And Peter Thiel. Like, these people.
Everyone brought up the exception to the rule. This is the biggest thing about all these sort of, like, I don't want to say it is controlled. This was definitely. This is, I guess, what you would call people trying to pursue like the liberal centrist solution to things. Let's debate it out. Let's hash out solutions. Well, I don't know. Every time that these people opened their mouths, I already knew what the solution was. The debate should have been aggressive immigration or passive passive aggressive deportation. That's really what it should have been. Yeah. But I mean, like Ann Coulter basically made the point in her concluding statements. Like, listen, if we did what James K. Polk wanted to do and make all of South and Central America part of the United States, America would stop being America because it doesn't have the ethnic demographic of the country. Like, she did everything in her power to just like basically listen, it's about white people. And if you can't get that through your skull, it's not you're not gonna make it, was basically her point. Whereas at the whole time, Sohrab Ahmari is trying to do the whole well, what if we appeal to the left? And let's not kid ourselves, Sohrab Ahmari is a progressive, but he was doing the honest Bernie Sanders argument about the Koch brothers and about open borders and about how this makes and disenfranchises labor markets. It's harder to have organized labor, and it's funny he's focusing on labor, but the whole point. And this is why we're doing this stream, because the entirety of this entire hour and a half that we were listening to these people talk, it was just me and Repeal the 20th Century arguing with the people on stage. We were like boomers yelling at the radio and yelling at the TV. Who the fuck cares about what Fox News says now that Tucker Carlson's gone? Because the young Cenk Uygur was just Fox News is they're retarded demagogues. And it's just I don't care what Fox News says. I actually care about when I look outside my window or I go downtown in Dallas and I see what the country's turned into. And it's Also, the people that we do bring in here, the whole, I'm sorry, we all watched Oppenheimer. We all know what that movie's about. You're a New Deal Democrat. Thank you for telling me that you're a communist. I appreciate it. Turns out we bring people in here that do have dual loyalties and do have all these positions. And it's just, it was just a shit show. But no, there was no Q&A session. All the speakers left right away. I really wish there was a Q&A because we wouldn't be live right now. We would be griping the event. But
yeah, I actually came prepared with things to say to these people if I had a chance or their questions. Unfortunately, there was none of that. But I really wanted to ask Nick Gillespie about the question of how do you think this is a good idea to bring in all these immigrants if they overwhelmingly don't support the policies you support? How do you think we will ever get this society that you want and all the policies you say will make America better if they don't support them? And that we're moving to this way where we're going to have more and more and more immigrants moving the line further away from your positions. Because I don't think I've ever gotten a good answer from literally anybody except for Brian Kaplan, who I asked this question. And basically his answer was, well, we'll just disenfranchise them. And without saying explicitly this, he basically said we're just going to create an apartheid state. So I was like, okay, well, at least that's better. That's a better answer than I could have imagined. But yeah, I couldn't imagine what Nick Gillespie would say.
World's most honest libertarian.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate Brian Kaplan. Out of all the libertarians who are kind of this open borders types, at least he's very honest. Yeah, I don't really want these people to vote if we're going to be importing them en masse. So I appreciate that. But yeah, I would have asked Nick Gillespie that. I think also it would have been a good thing to ask Cenk Uygur, since he did say Italian immigration caused Italian food to be the most popular in America. And then now it's Mexican food, to say, how is this not doing exactly what Anne said about changing our culture and us, not them assimilating, but us assimilating to them? I think that would have been a good question for them. But I can't imagine Cenk. I mean, it was funny at the beginning of the debate. Barry Weiss was very much let's not call the anti-border side to racist or nativist, but let's also not call the liberals crazy or deranged or whatever. And Cenk Uygur did basically call, Ann Coulter and all of Fox News racist and nativists. And nobody said anything about it. And I'm sure he would have said that about me, saying the assimilation point. I wouldn't have cared, but I don't know. It's it was just very wild that we were just hearing the typical points from really both sides. It's just one side obviously has better points.
Well, one side is just objectively true. We already know the answer to this, right? It's like Sergey Lewis says in chat, life, liberty, and the pursuit of taco trucks on every street corner. I want people to get to a point where they just say so. I mean, that actually did happen on the debate stage. I think Sohrab Ahmari jokingly just said, well, who the fuck cares at a certain point,
Yeah. And Coulter also said so because Nick Gillespie and Cenk Uygur were trying to hit her when she was talking about the national security, and she brought up the children of immigrants or immigrants who came through on planes. Like, she brought up 9/11 was committed by immigrants, and they were like, well, they didn't come over the border. And she was like, so what? Who cares that they didn't come over the border? I'm not arguing literally just people who come over the physical border. I'm arguing immigration in general. Because they routinely, it was like trying to be really stupid about the definition of what the border meant in this passage as to only mean the physical border, when Ann Coulter was like, no, even these people who are coming over on their airplanes, overstaying their visas, whatever, I don't want them. And, that they really didn't want to engage with that, because it really would have hurt one of their good arguments. I say that with quotations, which is that, oh, look at Italian immigrants, look at Jewish immigrants and how much they've contributed. Because she's saying, actually, no, not even those people.
I mean, even non-immigration hardliners will make the point saying, I mean, even I don't know what Martyr Maid's position on this, but he did tweet about it a while back where he was basically saying, look, every time that America's brought in waves of immigrants here, there had to have been a long period to get them assimilated, or at least just make America adjust to the new population. And you don't get anything resembling America after the closing of the frontier for sort of a unified what's white and what's black. And there were still tensions about this. I mean, look at the 70s and 60s. There was still a deep WASP resentment towards Ellis Islanders, although slowly as the civil rights movement came along, that would change to sort of just be white versus black. However, Daryl Cooper made this point saying, like, look, we haven't had anything like that since World War II. There has not been a conflict or anything in America that has said, okay, enough is enough. Let's try and settle with what we have right now and make sense of everything. This is also the first time where we've had immigration in American history where it's not really just Europeans and it's not very specific types of Europeans. And so now you're trying to assimilate cultures that are too just too fucking different from what's already here, and they're not capable of assimilating. We already know what this looks like. We see this all the time. Kids and people get into relationships and associations with people that look like them. Why do all the black kids sit at the same table? Because they know what their kind is. It's the same thing in any sort of big, diversified, integrated school district. You see this all the time. I mean, hell, I finished high school in El Paso. You already knew how the game fucking worked. The paisanos were with the paisanos, the military brats were with the military brats, and everyone just sort of hung out because, again, it was mainly a mono-ethnic culture down there because it's 85% Hispanic or Mexican. The same thing none of these people on the debate stage addressed it. Again, Ann Coulter was just basically trying to say, listen, it's about white people. And if you don't really get that through your skull, you're not going to make it. And again, she didn't say it, but she made it very specific that was the case. And, even the arguments about H-1B visas got brought up. Visa overstay got brought up. H-2B visas about agricultural workers did not get mentioned by name at all. So H-2B wasn't addressed. There wasn't any discussion about how to, solve visa overstays. A lot of the discussion, though, and this was brought on by Ann Coulter, and I'm really glad she brought it up, was talking about how the data about immigration is purposefully not counted into, properly, and also the ways that we talk about, oh, we have the lowest unemployment rate right now. Yeah, almost all of the labor went to foreign-born workers. Native, born American citizens did not see any job growth in the last several months. Also, we can look at the whole, thing that they talked about with diversity hiring. Oh, and in 2021, we said that we were going to hire more people of color. We did. 96% of new hires went to non-whites. And it's just okay, tell me again, nothing about, and I was very surprised that neither Cenk Uygur or Nick Gillespie talked about the whole Van Jones white lash. The Great Replacement by name was not mentioned at all. Basically, everyone was trying to talk about the issue of immigration without basically saying, listen, if you change the fucking population here, this isn't the ship of Theseus over here. It's not going to be the same boat. It's not going to be the same country. And the only person who made that point, and the person that we agreed with at the end of the day, was Ann Coulter, of all people. Mm-hmm. And that was going to be the end-all, be-all of what we were going to listen to. And really, Ann Coulter was like, so what? These people shouldn't be here, and obviously they commit the terrorist attacks. Visa overstays lead to people committing crimes, and we don't track them. We don't enforce the laws on the books, and we're sitting here debating while the country is being overrun, and cities like Chicago can't even manage, the immigration issue here. And she talked about California at the end. She was just like, "Listen, California figured it out, and then 20 million Mexicans come over, and it's all game over from here."
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty poignant point, and she did very well to bring that up when the Cenk Uygur brought up the supposed study that actually native-borns commit more crime than illegal immigrants. She brought up very well, and if you don't already know this, you should assimilate this into your vocabulary when talking to people. Is that those studies only look at prison populations and then look at the people who were fingerprinted by Border Patrol when they were arrested, which what that means, by the way, is that they were arrested by Border Patrol. So only illegal immigrants arrested by Border Patrol were going into that study to say that actually the rates were higher. But then when you looked at the ethnic makeup of these people, it was overwhelmingly Hispanic in Texas. And then the Border Patrol agency has said multiple times that the Texas prison system does not ask about immigrant status. So there's literally no way for them to actually get conclusive data on this. And Anne was very greatly making the point that the government will not give us these breakdowns in prisons, and we're the only side asking for it. The other side is not asking for this data. They don't want this data to come out because even the little glimpses we get of it show overwhelmingly that actually no, immigrants and illegal immigrants do not commit less crime than native-borns. They commit more. And even if that was true, that native-borns don't, their children obviously do. If just looking at the ethnic breakdowns of who's committing crime per capita. And another thing that I thought was weird that Nick Gillespie, I think, brought up, where he was like, we have record low unemployment. And I was just thinking in my head, what the hell does immigration have to do with unemployment rates? Let's even forget that labor force participation rate is down, which would lead to lower unemployment. But how would that affect unemployment?
Well, also the way that unemployment is counted is so wonky anyways. Yeah. So if you've been unemployed for longer than a year and you're not on unemployment and you're not actively seeking a job, the government, for all intents and purposes, stops counting you as unemployed.
Yeah.
So our unemployment numbers are way higher than they actually are on paper because the way that we have that measurement put down for the rhetoric. Yeah, three nebbish dorks with rhetorical and taxi illegalistically pick at the border question, while Ann Coulter alone says so. I'm glad I didn't spend any money on this one, by the way. Well, you know what? I will say that I did spend money on it. I got to enjoy it with a friend, and your super chats will eventually make up the cost. But I can write this off on my taxes in the next year, so it all works out.
Yeah, I'm going to write it off as a school expense because I'm in law school. So I'm just going to say this was for my legal studies. But yeah, and I'm just thinking, what does this have to do with unemployment? Because adding more people to the system would not decrease unemployment. There's just no conceptual way. And it really comes from this thing that all these studies that show that actually we get better economic effects with immigrants are just doing correlation. They're not doing causation. But you know what happens when we get lots of immigrants is that we usually have an economic boom or some kind of technology that makes America really attractive that happens. He brought I think it was Cenk Uygur who brought up Apple and Steve Jobs. We had a big immigration boom after Apple went on the market precisely because this new technology existed that helped increase our market and also our welfare benefits and how much they were paying out. So, yeah, maybe immigrants are going to come more when there's a boom. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe when economic booms happen, we have more immigration, not the other way around. Because, again, these studies just show correlation. And really, it's only that Cato study that shows that. The rest of them are very inconclusive. And are basically just kind of like, yeah, they may or may not improve the economy. I don't know. Really, we got to just do more studies on it. But overall, it's just kind of like maybe.
Yeah. An inconclusive study is the greatest way of saying, please give us more money.
Yeah.
And that's all. I mean, you see this all the time with a lot of government-granted research. Is that they'll come to an inconclusive result, or more data is needed, and then they'll ask for more money, and that happens quite often. The thing about this, though, that was just like, I remember, like, what was it, maybe like 5 years ago at this point, maybe, where like Styx Hexenhammer of all people was like, I don't want to debate leftists anymore, and people were giving him shit for it. Like, no, this is totally a different situation now, where we're just ignoring. Like, debates are fake and gay at this point. Like, I'd rather talk to people I disagree with. Yeah. Oh, and I'm at a friend's apartment right now in Dallas.
Yeah, my mic's a headset mic, and we're just like, we have it pointed towards us.
We're just ranting into the microphone as we talk about this debate that we just came to. So, I mean, like, again, so this was Barry Weiss organizing it, the America debates presented by the Free Press and Fire. And yeah, it was, well, I don't want to say it was a waste of time, because I'm at least talking about it and I'm making some money off of it or whatever. But it was like, again, for those who were just tuning in, we went back in time to 2015, 2016, and Coulter sounded like the alt-right, and without the less explicit racial language, but she tried to make it as racial as possible. And it was really funny to listen to. And then this was the great tell about how messed up this debate was, because at the end of the debate, they were asking a book that you would recommend to read, and who is your favorite president? So Ann Coulter said she loved George Washington. Both Sohrab Ahmari and Cenk Uygur said FDR was their favorite president. Oh, who would have fucking guessed? And Nick Gillespie, being a libertarian, didn't have a favorite president.
I'm surprised he didn't say Calvin Coolidge. Like, that's the typical libertarian answer. And I feel like I've heard him say that before, but I don't know. I guess he was just trying to be, contrarian in some way.
Yeah. I mean, entertaining, yes. Insightful, no. Well, I mean, if you're already into online politics and you do it as a hobby, or if you are engaged in like the real political world and government, or you're part of like the Federalist Society or whatever, you already know these things.
Yeah.
You already know these things about immigration or about politics and how these debates work. If you don't do this, and politics is about your bread and butter issues or the stuff that you see on the news, then this debate probably meant something more to you.
Yeah, I think actually there was a lot of productiveness to come out of this debate if you're like a normal person. Because really, Ann Coulter it's a lot of the same rhetoric that she was having, but we have to remember Ann Coulter was considered like a super radical in the heyday of her time. She was considered as being like the most racist person talking on Fox News and everything like that. And now she seems not too extreme. And I think tonight was a really good showcase that we're actually like winning. We're actually winning on this issue. And they showed some really great statistics that immigration is the #1 issue going into 2024. And I mean, even though this was like a Barry Weiss hosted event, I think it says a lot that even after this debate showing, where I think, Armani kind of ruined Coulter's points and may have cost, why it went down instead of up. But that still, the majority of the people there said that we need to close the borders. Not, we just need to deport illegal immigrants and, still let in lots of legal immigrants. We need to close the border. Even Armani was saying, we need to reduce legal immigration, which was a huge surprise going into this, knowing who he was. I was not expecting him to advocate for reducing legal immigration, though, again, he only said it for like low-skilled immigrants. He still wants, the IT guys from India in like Pakistan to come into the country, because then he wouldn't have come into the country if he, pulled up that ladder.
Basically.
But that's still a huge, major right step, like in the right direction. And that, I think, is important to acknowledge. And a lot of the benefit I extracted from tonight, where, I feel comfortable saying I spent an okay.
I spent an
spending this
okay,
money.
I spent an okay amount of money
Yeah.
to this event. Because I mean, again, I think that it's important. uh, you guys know my channel and my position on a lot of this stuff, but because especially about the whole, just being too online. And I mean, like, I went to this thing, and I know some of these people have me blocked on Twitter. Half the panel on that debate stage has me blocked on Twitter. But it was, I got to go with a friend, IRL, and we had a fun time just laughing
Yeah.
and chuckling. We were just like, no fucking way! Like, what year is it? And having a fun time with it. But also, it's important to sort of gauge where the rest of your non-online world is from. But again, you do need skilled. Like, I get the skilled labor argument, and I think that you can have some of that. But I don't think it should come at the cost of demographically changing the country. And I mean, this was also the thing that was being talked about too. Is that it wasn't just South America or Mexico anymore, or the countries bordering Mexico. It was other nations all across the world, not just here. And this was the thing that was actually discussed even by the pro keep the border open side was, listen, it's not Mexicans anymore. It's not the stereotypical border hopper meme from 3 years ago, or 15 or 20 years ago, when Pat Buchanan was around and popular and running for president. It's from all over the world. And everyone, both progressives and conservatives, can go down to the southern border and see that it is mainly military-aged men from parts of South America and parts from China, Persia, well, not Persia, not Iran, but parts of the Middle East, parts of Africa, parts of Southeast Asia that are going through the Darien Gap. And
Yeah.
again, there was no discussion at all from the NGOs and the charity groups, whether it be Catholic charities or high ass right, that are supporting this. And no, there was no discussion about that at all. It was just simply about whether or not immigration, period, was a boon or bust for the country.
Yeah.
And again, it wasn't anything that, if you're listening to me, or if you Repeal the 20th Century's work, you already know our positions on this. And we were team Ann Coulter all the way. We were in the back just clapping when good points were made, and we were cheering for Ann Coulter. I did have to laugh because Ann Coulter told everyone to read Camp of the Saints very nonchalantly. She was like, yeah, y'all should read Camp of the Saints. I didn't know Frenchmen were funny, but it's a good book. It's banned, by the way. It's a banned book, but you should read Camp of the Saints.
That was the highlight.
That was kind of the highlight, was rather than her telling us to go read her book, Adios America, she was telling everyone to go read Camp of the Saints.
Which, yeah, Camp of the Saints is really a great, rhetorically book for this issue, because, I think a lot of people overestimate how often the normie responds to a study. They actually don't really care about studies. They want the point to be illustrated in some kind of media for them. If somehow we could make Camp of the Saints into a Marvel movie or something, then I think we would win. I think Donald Trump would win with 70% of the vote if we could do that. So if somebody wants to get on that about turning Camp of the Saints into a Marvel movie, I think that's the way to win. But seriously, people respond to media a lot more than they do just throwing a study. Most normies are not going to be able to tell you why immigration is good with a study. They're going to tell you what their favorite, Twitch streamer said, or, they just watched Children of Men, and they're like, well, that movie really sold it for me, that we need to let in, the entire third world into our country. And, Ann Coulter, I think, really understands that and made those points really well. And I think her book recommendation reflected that. I can only remember what Cenk Uygur recommended because it was his own book, Justice is Coming. I don't even remember what Nick Gillespie did, or Sohrab Ahmani, but I'm pretty sure their books were policy-heavy books that no one's going to read.
Sohrab Ahmani referenced Michael Lynn's latest book about immigration and how it affects the labor market. That was it. I don't remember what Nick Gillespie had recommended. I think that this debate will eventually be on YouTube on the free.
Hopefully.
Well, no, it will be because they put out the Sexual Revolution one from last year in October, I think, is when they had that one with Luis Perry and them. So yeah, I mean, no. Imagine how inner city minorities feel as their people. Yeah, no, exactly. This was the thing that even
Armani was making.
Amari made the point, and I think one of the super chats mentions it too. But I mean, even Sorab and Ann Coulter was saying, like, listen, Chicago can't handle 50,000. What was it? 50,000 migrants being dropped in Chicago, and they're saying it's not enough. And it was really interesting because the clips that we saw at the beginning, they were all like a bunch of news clips from Trump and from the progressive side and everything. But even like inner city blacks in Chicago were like, these people are getting shit we can't get a hold of without like seriously threatening our aldermen, you know? And so if the patronage system, you know, the ethnic spoil system of like inner city black Chicago Democrats doesn't work for them and it has to be prioritized for migrants because, you know, sanctuary cities or whatever, it really does tell you how bad it is. And I mean, again, so I just saw this tweet earlier from a gentleman from Jay. He just says, booked a hotel for a few nights in New York. Total cost was $3,000. Illegal immigrants, in parentheses, criminals, subsidized by the U.S. government, in parentheses, with taxpayer dollars, now occupy a significant percentage of the hotel room inventory in New York City. The net result, higher prices for law-abiding citizens. Yeah. I mean, that's just true.
You can also even just see that point if you go watch. So I watch a lot of like police cam body footage because I'm a sick freak who like really likes seeing cops beat down criminals. But if you look at like basically any case of cops responding to an incident with like Hispanics or something, they're always at a hotel room. I notice it all the time. There's so many police body cam footage where they're responding where there's like a Hispanic offender, and they're at a hotel room. And it really is because that we are subsidizing illegal immigrants to stay here on taxpayer dollars. And then, Cenk Uygur and Nick Gillespie have the gall to say, actually, these people don't receive any benefits. It's like, no, actually, all they have to do is find some NGO who will pay for them, who is getting taxpayer money. And even then, I mean, it is very easy to get a fake social security number. It is. I've looked at the process and done everything up to what is illegal in this process. It took me like 5 minutes to do it. And that's all you need to receive welfare benefits. Or even if you find a social security number of like some elderly person, you can start collecting their social security checks. And, if it's like a rich elderly person, they might not even notice that they're not getting their social security checks. And it's going to, it's going to some illegal migrant who stole their social security number. And I think as cringe as it was that our like Sorab was making the point of like, here's like Cesar Chavez saying we don't want immigrants, and here's a guy who marched with MLK who didn't want immigrants. It really is telling that these places don't want them either. It's showing us that actually, we really can't live with these people. Some of them I assume are good people, but we can't. And Ann Coulter made this point with Minnesota and California, where she was like, Minnesota used to be one of the cleanest states in the country, and now like child rape has gone up massively, all kinds of crime has gone massive. It's no longer one of the cleanest states in the country. And then she used California to say California used to be a paradise, and this is true. California really did used to be a paradise. It used to have a balanced budget. It used to be one of the cleanest places in the country, one of the most economically best places to live in the country, one of the most affordable to live. But yeah, I think. Sorry, he showed me something funny, and I had to laugh. But it was one of the best places in the country. Now it's one of the worst places in the country. It's one of the places where everyone's leaving. If they can leave, they leave. And it's gross. It's dirty. I was in California back in January, and I was very disappointed because there were very beautiful places, amazing places that if this was a different California, I would want to live there, honestly. But unfortunately, everywhere you go, there's dirty disgustingness. and you can't live with it. And even us, with we were in Dallas for this, and as soon as we walked out of the theater,
as soon as we stepped outside, it reeked of weed.
It reeked of weed, and it's always like this. Because I lived here downtown. I'm not going to say exactly where. I don't want to dox myself, but I live here downtown. Always at night, it reeks of weed. Anytime I'm out at night, it reeks of weed. And I've literally walking down just down a little bit of the street, you can sometimes find homeless people like shooting up heroin. And it sucks. I hate this. It should not be like this. And a lot of people on the right like to go, anti-city posting, and I'm very inclined to it because I don't want to live in a city either. But a big reason why I don't want to live in a city is because they're this way. Cities were not always this way. Cities were not always this dirty, disgusting, and awful to be in. There was a period of time when it was pretty great to live in a city. Even then I probably wouldn't want to live in a city just because I don't like congestion. I don't like being around a lot of people this long. But
oh my gosh, it took me way too okay, not to dox myself either, but it driving down to the DFW Metroplex is not that bad of a drive for me. But oh my gosh, it took me 2.5+ hours to get here. It was insane. Thank God it started a little later than when it did, but still, it was just awful. But again, I think it was interesting to, step outside of the online bubble and to see what the center right or the center right liberals or just disaffected liberals are talking about immigration, where things are, and also where the conversation is for people who just listen to, maybe they don't maybe they don't listen to Rachel Maddow. Maybe they don't listen to Brian Waters on Fox News, but maybe they listen to, the Free Press, or they listen to Sorab, or they listen to the Young Turks or whatever. And even when those people are it's a problem, everyone kind of knows that this is the issue that is going to be at the forefront of the election. And again, I know that all in the backdrop of all of this, the whole abortion and IVF discussion is happening. No, this is a silver platter election issue. The immigration, the crime, the economy. Fucking run with it. Run with that. I get it. You can talk about abortion when you have power. Do what you want on abortion when you have power. Win the fucking election. Win the election. Win the election. Then you can do what you want that might be considered unpopular. But until then, you have to focus on what people are concerned about. When the thing that was told by us, and just to pull it out in the little introduction here, the immigration is the number one issue that is unprompted by voters. I get it. Elections have, you can have your no faith in them or whatever, but still, that's the one unprompted issue for them. And unfortunately, Republicans are really going to try and fumble the ball here, whereas Trump is trying to take a middle of the ground. Listen, I gave you what you wanted. Roe ended, and let the states decide, like we said. And now it's. But again, the immigration debate here was just a weird look at the world and what it looks like outside of the e-right space, I guess.
Yeah, and really it is immigration. It is all about immigration. It is the most important issue, and voters recognize that. They gave a really good poll that showed that 20% of Americans put that as its highest issue, which may not sound a lot, but then when you look at the breakdown, it is the most, what do you call it?
Yeah, so
it had the highest percentage.
Here's the Gallup poll. So in January of 2024, so this year, in January, immigration and government were the biggest issues at 20% and 21% respectively. As of February, so literally the next month, it goes now immigration 28%, and then government and the economy in general at 20% and 12% in general. So immigration is the number one issue with that respect. And it was really interesting because regardless of whatever you think about the theater behind the Martha's Vineyard thing, and I thought that Martin had a very good write-up about the political stunt that was, is that, even Chuck Yeager was telling the border states to lift the burden off of them and send it to blue sanctuary cities. He's like, that's a good idea. And I was just like, okay, Chuck, You're just a clever little potato, aren't you, there, buddy?
Yeah, I think, particularly what we have to look at is like, even in that poll, I bet you if you looked at the second or third most important issue for everyone who didn't pick immigration as their top issue, immigration is probably the second or third for them. But I wanted to say, because I don't want to go too down the rabbit hole of the abortion thing, because I have a lot of thoughts on that. But I think a lot of people, to put in perspective where we are on abortion, need to watch this documentary called The Army of God. I just rewatched it. And look how much we've progressed on that, and realize, look, we got a huge major victory with Roe being overturned. And now Arizona's Supreme Court is saying we're going to ban abortion. That
implementing an 1854 law.
Yeah, like we need to recognize that we can put that on the back burner for a little bit. I get it. Babies dying is not a good thing. I hate it. Trust me, in undergrad, I was that guy holding the sign with the aborted babies. I did that in my undergrad. So I get it. This is very important to me. But, Trump's just lying through his teeth when he's saying, we have to leave it to the states, and we're going to go with Arizona. You got to remember, we had this victory because of him. He understands that sometimes you just have to lie. Actually, very secret polemic, a secret tactic that we need to learn on the right.
It's a
secret.
It's a surprise tool
actually
that'll help us later.
Just lie. Sometimes you just have to lie to win in politics. That's not great, because lying is bad. I don't want us to lie, but we have to lie. And I think Trump's just lying through his teeth. And all these people who are, stomping their feet and mad that, Trump said what he said, need to realize immigration is the most important issue. And he's trying to cool off the fact
he's trying to win an election.
Yeah, that abortion is not a popular issue for us, especially when we win. Every time we get a victory, the support for pro-life actually goes down. It's really weird. I don't know what the hell is going on with Americans, where when pro-choicers win, suddenly pro-life support goes up. And then when pro-lifers win, pro-choice support goes up. It's really weird. But we have to realize that, and that this is where we're at. And we need to support the guy who's best on immigration, no matter what. It doesn't matter what else he's saying, because even if Trump was to say, I'm going to implement a pro-life rule if I'm elected, if he's successful on immigration, we've got a year or two before, after he's gone, before, it's back to pro-life America, because he'll have fixed the demographic problem. I had this issue with a guy who said, I would let, America become Mexico if we would just be pro-life. And that's really stupid thinking, because if America became Mexico, that just means more abortion. Even if you banned abortion, one, illegal abortions are going to go up. And two, eventually, within a year probably, we're just going to flip it back and it's going to be legal again. While if you don't do that, and the implication in this hypothetical was that, you deport a lot of immigrants, eventually America's going to become pro-life, because guess what? Apparently, white Europeans care very much about babies not dying, while other groups of people, not so much. Because, in Mexico, a lot of people don't realize this, the base Mexico that people like to talk about sometimes actually has double the abortion rate. So I think it's very important. If you're pro-life, you should be very, very hard on immigration, because these people are going to kill more babies, and they're going to vote that we kill more babies. So that's my piece on it.
I mean, everything right now I think needs to be downhill from that. That's just me. So to an extent, it's the same issue. Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
It is the same issue. Every issue we have right now, every issue the right cares about is downstream from immigration. Every problem that I want to say probably actually, because there are some economic issues where I might be willing to say, okay, it's not because of immigration. But basically, every issue the right has today is a problem because of immigration.
I mean, I know that there was a debate between what's that guy's name, Drew Pavlo, and Joel Davis on this issue. Because when Drew Pavlo was tweeting the other day, we can the stuff in Israel and Gaza is bad for the social cohesion of other countries. Isn't that not an immigration argument? Thank you for making the
Yes.
immigration restrictionist case for me. Like, well done, open borders, moron. Like, I appreciate it. I'm not going to stop my position on being pro-life. Like, that's not changing for me. But I also know, based in the response after the Dobbs decision and how a lot of the pro-life ballot stuff went in 2022, a lot of the pro-life movement as a machine, as a political machine, is not oriented on being pronatalism. It's not. It has a lot of other bad causes. And when it takes abortion off the table for fundraising and making money, it needs to reorganize and be a better institution. And it needs to be about making families work. And it doesn't do that. And that's a big problem with sort of the national right to life stuff, is that it doesn't answer that problem. And it's just coming from someone who has gone to marches to end abortion. I have protested outside abortion clinics. I've been there. But yeah, I mean, I know it's a complicated issue. Trust me, I get it. But again, I think that he can make a big case by trying to chase it back to immigration. And again, that would work a hell of a whole lot more for this. But I'm gonna quickly wrap up these super chats real quick, and we'll just move on through them. But overall, was it entertaining? Yes. Was it weird to see Normie World for a little bit? Yeah, it would. But you have to look at the polls, which we know are fake and used to corral us into false dilemmas, but do us anyway. I hate to break it to you, buddy, but that's still the way that elections work.
Yeah, I mean, elections are false dilemmas. That's the problem. If we lived in a parliamentary system, it'd be way, way different. I am getting a message again to shill Army of God. Even though I already did, I need to shill it again. It's very imperative that people watch Army of God if you are like one of these people who are mad about what Trump says, to kind of contextualize where we were. Because in the 90s, all of us were the people who were like, well, it looks like we have to just bomb abortion clinics because it looks like it's not going for us. And now we're, having abortions banned in I think the majority of states now.
I think it's like 26.
Yeah, I think it's 26, 27. Oh, sorry, soldiers in the Army of God. I said it wrong. It's not Army of God. It's soldiers in the Army of God. So watch that, and then please pivot to making immigration your most important issue. We can have these grievances about abortion and Trump kind of being weak on it once we've solved the immigration issue.
And this was literally the point, Jimmy John, that Sora Bamari was making. Which was really funny to watch the libertarian of all people outright deny that immigration does reduce wages. Which it does. Oh, but Jimmy John's just paying people $20 an hour to make sandwiches. That doesn't beat. You're not talking. Everyone was talking past each other. Everyone knew that they were talking past each other, and the only person that made a lick of fucking sense was Ann Coulter saying, "Look outside and tell me what country this is, because it's not it."
Yeah, she was very polemically strong. But yeah, let's go to your super chat. So we don't ignore your little pay
the little pay
goblins.
As much as I like harping on immigration, I think that I don't think that even if we're late, better late than never. Holy shit!
America is still what, 6? I think it's 60% white.
54.
54. Okay. As long as that number is above 50, you really can't say it's over. And even then, Rhodesia was unsustainable, but Rhodesia's problem was that it didn't use the fact that there was like a white class in power to fix their demographic situation. So there really isn't no hope. I will say that there's going to be a lot less hope if Trump doesn't win in 2024. I'm not going to be Mr. Black Pill on that, because I think black pilling is like pointless, especially if you're a Christian. But yeah, I think that really this is a lot of people like to say this is the most important election of our lifetime. This is the most important election of our lifetime, and I mean that unironically.
Yeah, fun entertainment value, but again, Ann Coulter was like, listen, do you want America to be a white country or not? That was basically her point. And so, again, she was sort of the only one preaching to the, I don't have a lot of hope in normal politics. Neither do we, buddy. Neither do we.
Yeah,
both outcomes of this election are accelerationist outcomes. Yeah, potentially. That's definitely true. But I'm just going to get to the super chats and we'll wrap it up here for the debate. The entropy one, it's Sam153. He says, "Did you make a bingo card for this? Did you hit a bingo?" We didn't make a bingo card for. I didn't.
I made a joke about a drinking game of Cenk Uygur saying, of course, because that used to be his big thing, but he only said it once, actually.
So yeah,
So I was surprised by that. I mean, if I made a bingo card, I probably would have got a blackout because I like just thinking in my head what I would have made a bingo card before this, like all of those things were said. So
I'm very glad I don't drink. That's all I'm going to say. So Westy sends $2. Just says biggest need for no immigration. Very true. Cody Browning for $4.99. Even the different immigrant white ethnic Catholics didn't like each other in the early 20th century. Read Mike Royko's boss about Mayor Daley in Chicago on this.
Yeah, I made a joke about so I'm half Ellis Islander, I'm half Italian, and I made a joke about we actually did need to deport all those mix like in the middle of the debate because this is true. They didn't even like each other, and that's actually a very poignant point that Cenk Uygur was kind of making with the Italian food, Mexican food is that like. Italians don't like Mexicans. It's very telling that the immigrants who have had a chance to kind of assimilate into our culture, really changing our culture towards them and them changing a little bit towards our culture as the point made in cultural transplant. It's telling that they don't like each other.
And I mean, you can look at New Jersey as a great example of this. Every electoral race between Republicans and Democrats is basically Italians versus Irishmen.
Yeah,
every election's like that. Cody Browning again says Mayor Johnson of Chicago just asked city aldermen to spend $70 million of city surplus on the 40,000 illegal immigrants from Texas. I think it's 50,000 is what was said in the debate, but that doesn't surprise me. $70 million, and this is a city of 8.5 million people, and they can't handle a sudden influx of 50,000. And again, how is the country supposed to handle untold millions? Because that 13 million illegal immigrant number, it's been that number for 50 years. It's way more than that. Way more.
Yeah.
Jack says it's a Korean. Sawed off. We're full. Well, I didn't know that Kim Jong-un was sending us money, but we appreciate it. Apparently North Korea is full.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. Raging Mandrill for $1.99 says California is my home. It was taken from my family. I mean, again, remember, this was a place that was, the dream. Where goes California, so goes the nation. And I think we already know the answer to that. But I mean, that was also funny that fucking Sohrab Ahmari said his favorite immigrant was Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. It is really sad that we're losing California. Like, I wouldn't call myself, one of these, at least anymore, one of these, secession. National divorce. Yeah, national divorce types like that. This is the only way forward. But I am more sympathetic that it would be okay than I think maybe somebody like Mystery Grove. But I really sympathize with Mystery Grove's point that maybe we shouldn't it's really sad to give away these great pieces of land and great feats of American civilization that really California is or at least was. I'm not so sure it's that anymore or there's anything really left to salvage.
There's a lot of places still worth salvaging.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true, but are they worth salvaging? Are they worth the price of salvaging is the question, and I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah. But Mandrill and I think, may have different opinions on abortion, but he says that it should be decided by the states. Let us continue the great separation. Keep leftists and blue states stability before reconquest. I mean, let liberal. I mean, this is the thing about what the Dobbs decision that, yes, the red states are going to be more restrictive on it, which I'm all for. Blue states, of course, are going to do whatever they can. And we saw the reaction to the Dobbs decision where, again, it's about the whole manipulating procedural outcomes to get a desired result. When the private sector, NGOs, and charities, quote unquote charities, are telling people, we will pay for you to travel to a blue state in order to get this horrible thing done. we will subsidize your act of murder. It really does tell you how fucking insane half the country has gone
Yeah.
on this issue. And I mean, this is something that Mystery Grove wrote a really good essay about. Like, listen, why people long for Fresh Prince or long for the 90s and going back to them is because there was a generally agreed upon consensus about a lot of things. Abortion as an issue was not nearly as well, maybe it could be, but I mean, abortion as an issue was not nearly as radical outside of the pro-life position, because there was this agreed upon thing that we just don't talk about, or we just accept that that's the law of the land. I mean, even a lot of mainstream Democrats didn't like campaigning on the issue about it, except saying, "Oh, right to choose," or maybe within the first trimester. Now, of course, it's radically different and whatnot, but I think that it's important to consider that a great victory on this issue has been won. I don't want people to be continuing on with baby sacrifices, and it's going to be that case in blue states. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. But again, this is going to be the great separation is there. But what Mystery Grove's point was, people are fucking insane. They do have brain worms that make them crazy libtards and sometimes even crazy rightists, although sometimes I'm more inclined to make exception to our rightist friends than anyone else. But it does tell you that what we're dealing with here is that a lot of people have accepted this because the media told them this, their governments told them this, their education system told them this. Our entire socialization has turned us into radicals on all sides, more so the left than anyone else. And that's considered normal. The extremism of today that would make even Barack Obama kind of whoa, optics check. This is where we're at. And unfortunately, that great separation is, I think, there ideologically. Can it be healed? Maybe, but I don't think that that's the kind of power that anyone has on the right now. I mean, this whole putting the woke away discussion that we see on the timeline, that's as close as you'll probably get. Yeah. And what is that? It's nothing but liberals critiquing the excesses while reifying and accepting the premise. And that's not good enough.
Yeah, it's definitely not good enough. I do sympathize with the abortion being left to the states, at least in the short term. I mean, eventually I want it banned nationally, but I understand in the short term why we would need to do this. This just goes back to my point that, look, we can figure out immigration and then come back to this. And if we figure out immigration, guess what? I mean, it's going to happen anyways. That's what the numbers show. And so, I think we need to be better about our priorities. And I do agree with this kind of separation, because the more we stabilize the demographics in red states, the easier it'll be stabilized demographics in blue states, because it'll be a better position. I don't know if I would say anymore I'm full on that let's do a national divorce or something like that.
Yeah, no, they're for geopolitical and political realism reasons, I can't be for that.
Yeah.
And Raging Mandrill also says for sans immigration, cultural war would be won already. I mean, yeah. Again, also, people talk about the slippery slope. I want people to read the opinions and some of the questions that were asked in oral arguments in Griswold v. Connecticut in 1963. Read those arguments.
Yes.
Because if I recall correctly, I think it was Justice Black who had said, well, under this logic of an invented right to privacy, wouldn't this be the same logic that would be used one day to legalize abortion? And they said no. But 10 years later, in 1973, it was the issue that led to. I mean, the slippery slope is real, and again, everyone knows the logic about the emerging Democratic majority and things like that. Everyone knows this.
Yeah.
And so again, if you can reduce the number of, honestly, a lot of the culture war issues would not have been won if we didn't have ballot harvesting. We had fucking actual IDs, same day voting, no mail-in voting. If you had actual voting enfranchisement enforcement, where, listen, only citizens who show up with valid photo ID can vote, every election would be more or less red, because there would be no way to cheat.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that slippery slope also exists on immigration, like Ann Coulter said, and I was saying earlier. Even mass white immigration, European immigration caused all these problems. The thing is that they kept realizing that European immigrants are going to assimilate to the culture a lot faster, and so they assimilated too quickly to get everything they wanted done. So they keep finding new groups who are more and more foreign to the American culture, who will take longer to assimilate into American culture, to bring in and vote for all these policies and get us further and further away. Literally, you can trace every single issue back to some kind of immigration spike happening first. Every single one of these things, whether it be civil rights, whether it be expansion of the welfare state, any of these issues, you can trace it back to some explosion in immigration, even immigration from Europe. And I think now what we're seeing is that American culture is starting to assimilate to that, and Latin Americans are starting to assimilate to American culture, meeting in this middle here. And that's why there's now a pivot to more South Asian and African immigration. Something a lot of people don't realize is that the main reason why the Black population actually isn't falling a lot right now is because we're getting a lot of immigration from Africa. Africa is actually a major place that immigrants are coming in from now in the United States. So much so that the number of Black Americans, the percentage of them that are descended from slaves, is decreasing every year by a lot, because those Black Americans are just, killing each other and aborting their babies, while now Africans are coming here in mass numbers and are not doing those things. I mean, they're still killing each other, but they're not killing their babies as much.
I mean, you can literally see this with the whole Tariq Nasheed foundational Black American thing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's there, and it's important to consider in that respect. I mean, also, the whole you voted for this argument. I mean, just like remember in 2008, fucking California voted statewide to ban gay marriage. California voted statewide to ban public welfare and Gibbs to illegal immigrants. And again, the whole argument that that Nick Gillespie was trying to make was about, we need to just close the borders around the welfare state, not the whole United States. And it's like, sure, but there's so much more that we need to do to fix the system than just the welfare state. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, the welfare state has failed. I mean, go back in time before 2016 and listen to people like Paul Ryan, of all people, go on C-SPAN, go on book tours and tell you the war on poverty has fundamentally failed. And if you read his proposals, they're not bad proposals on how to fix the problem. A lot of those people had a lot of good fucking ideas. The problem is that they're missing the forest for the trees. They're missing their
priorities were out of whack.
The priorities were out of whack. And so, I mean, this is what allowed Trump to sort of take on the brand that he did and win. But nevertheless, it's not, and I mean, also, demographic changes the thinking. Everyone knows how this goes with the elections. Every election in New York City now, for the mayor's race is a great example. Every New York mayoral election is just a race for who can get the largest share of a particular ethnic bloc vote.
Yeah.
And you already know how this goes. Look at the voting results in Chicago. Look at the voting results for New York City or Los Angeles, and see how each particular demographic of every ethnicity voted for their particular candidate. And you're going to see that time and time again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, look, when they can't use immigrants to win the vote totals, like in California with gay marriage and banning welfare, what they do is another book you should read, Age of Entitlement, is just kind of rig it with, the Supreme Court. It was the Supreme Court who said gay marriage can stay legal, even though the people of California in a majority voted against it. And then they solidify these decisions by importing immigrants. And because basically when these victories happen, when, the Supreme Court says that, people start to not care about it. That's why now, even among Republicans, gay marriage has very high support, because that victory was won. And now that victory has been solidified through demographic change. And so it's really hard to reverse these things without fixing the demographic problem. You will never, ever get gay marriage banned again if the demographic problem is not restored. I cannot think of a single thing that us on the right want that's going to be achieved without solving this demographic issue.
Yeah. So, and then last but not least on Entropy, Owen Zaleski sends some money. Thank you very much, Owen. He says, hello, gents. Hope you're well. The play is going well, which is why I wasn't able to catch Digital Archipelago today. No worries, Mr. Zaleski. I hope the play went well. Opening night for The Tempest is Friday. Well, I will pray for your success. As much as people have abortion issues over racial questions, it's not it. Yeah, again, that a lot of these problems would solve themselves with other issues like criminal law enforcement and others being fixed, or just deportation writ large in general.
And Ann Coulter actually interestingly made that a point too, that like a lot of these laws are already on the books that we could be using.
That we just
we just don't enforce them.
Yeah.
And this is true of the criminal issue generally. You know, there a lot of prosecutors are running, and as somebody who's in law school, I'm very scared for the future because I look at my cohort and some of the things they say, and it's like they just don't want to enforce the law. They're all doing the sob story of, oh, they're so poor and they just had a tough life, so we need to just excuse the fact that they just raped this girl. Like in one case in Georgia, I think it's in Georgia. I can't remember the town in Georgia, but that district, the DA, is currently being removed from her position because she let the statute of limitations expire on a rapist who we had video of the rape because she just didn't want to prosecute it. And she literally campaigned and won on saying, I'm going to prosecute less. I'm going to bring less charges against people. And she's done that, and crime has increased in her district. So those are the big two things: is fixing the demographic issue by enforcing immigration, but also just enforcing the laws we have on the book generally, not just on immigration. We have basically every problem that lefties complain about, and even us on the right will complain about. There's already laws on the books to solve this problem. And we're just not enforcing them. We just aren't, So if we did that, a lot of these issues would start to disappear. So
and again, it requires political will and not beautiful loser syndrome. But overall, Repeal and I had a fun time traveling back to 2015 and listening to Ann Coulter sound like Richard Spencer. It was entertaining, to say the least. You already know our position on immigration writ large in general. So those are our quick thoughts and reactions. I will have a more fleshed out review of this debate written for the Old Glory Club Substack. I'll probably record it and put it out as a video on my channel as well. But I think I'll just end the stream here. I hope that you all had fun. We went to this thing, so you didn't have to. Enjoy. And like Ann Coulter said, if you haven't read Camp of the Saints already, by all means, please do so. You can find an audiobook as well as a copy of it online to read as a PDF for free. So with that, we will see you all later. God bless and goodbye.